The F1 season is slowly but surely entering its final stages, and the big talking point after Baku is whether or not Max Verstappen actually has an outside shot at the F1 title again. All eyes are on Singapore this weekend, but why is this race in particular so important for Red Bull Racing? We're revealing all in today's GPFans Special. This season started the same way last season ended, namely with McLaren setting the pace, while Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari were left scrapping for having the second best car. Verstappen managed to win his fourth title last year, but mainly because of the big lead he built up at the start of the year, when Red Bull machinery was still on top. After Imola last year, however, McLaren suddenly became the team to beat, and this is still the case in 2025 with the MCL 39, although they haven't always delivered as well as they could have. At Red Bull, the RB21 was a continuation of the RB20, which still had its bad habits from the year prior. The small window in which the car operated was the most common complaint, and for long, no solution was ever found for this. It was thought that if Red Bull could hit that window, it could compete with McLaren, but more often than not, it was never found. Verstappen often complained about understeer and the car's unpredictability in the corners. Besides this, McLaren figured out a brilliant way to drastically reduce tire wear, which particularly gave them a big edge in a full race. This meant Verstappen set up his car in pretty unconventional ways throughout the European leg of the season. At the British Grand Prix, he gambled on a low downforce setup, for example. This worked in the dry, but in the rain, it all fell apart. These kinds of big swings were needed for him to even have a chance at winning. However, since Lauren Mekies took over after the British Grand Prix, a couple of things have changed. With Mekies in charge, the build-up of a Grand Prix weekend has been worked on. The correlation between the data from the sim at the factory and the real thing on track often differed greatly. Dr. Helmut Marko revealed to Dutch newspaper De Telegraaf there's a new way of thinking now, which has been a great success at both Monza and Baku. Quote, "We listen carefully to our driver. Max has driven more than 200 races and has a wealth of experience, as does his race engineer, Giampiero Lambiase. We don't just look at data, we listen more to our own instincts and see what happens in practice." End quote. Still, that isn't the whole story. Red Bull have developed upgrades since the summer break, while some teams have already fully focused on 2026 by now. One of the most crucial upgrades is the new floor, which Verstappen has had since Monza and Yuki Tsunoda has also used in Baku. It shows Red Bull aren't hanging around and still are attempting to make Verstappen champion. Besides the floor, some journalists have picked up that Red Bull have improved the cooling systems on both the brakes and the tires, a system similar to the MCL 39s. This has improved tire management, bringing that aspect on par with McLaren. All eyes are now on Singapore, and for good reason. Verstappen has now shown that the RB21 is great on low downforce circuits like Monza and Baku, but now the question is, can Red Bull fight McLaren on the track that should suit the MCL 39 to a T? Singapore is a high downforce track full of medium-speed corners, which is where the McLaren shines. Singapore is also the only track Verstappen's never won at that he has raced on in F1. This year has some things that are similar to the legendary 07 season. That was when two-time reigning champion Fernando Alonso switched to McLaren, partnered by rookie teammate Lewis Hamilton. Alonso and Hamilton were extremely well matched, and it is similar in some ways to what we're seeing between Piastri and Norris in 2025. Max Verstappen is raking in the points while the two McLarens are dropping them, just like Kimi Räikkönen did for Ferrari back in 07. Räikkönen came from nowhere in the latter stages of the year to win his only championship at the last race of the season by just a single point. He had 110 points, while both Alonso and Hamilton had 109. If Red Bull are competitive on the streets of Singapore this weekend, it could well and truly be game on. However, even if this is the case, Verstappen will need McLaren to slip up more often, as he needs to make up 69 points in just 7 weekends, including 3 sprints. Lauren Mekies is clear about where Red Bull's priorities lie. Quote, "We're trying to take a high-risk approach, so we learn as much as we can at the end of the season first, and that takes precedence over discussions about the championship or anything else. This approach is necessary because the gap between Max and Oscar is significant. We can't count on McLaren making mistakes too often," Mekies explained to Sky Sports F1 in Baku. That brings us to the end of this week's GP Fans Special. Do you think Red Bull can be competitive in Singapore? Let us know in the comments. But either way, thank you so much for watching and hopefully catch you in the next one. Peace.